It is so easy to think of clothing as something that doesn't exist without context, and that is never going to be true. It's never going to be true. Clothing exists within the context of politics, of religion, of culture, of society, of your personal beliefs, of how we think of the world. All of that is important. That is detrimental to think that none of that exists without context. Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Amanda. Here on this channel, we talk about all things sewing, crafting, acting, other stuff. And if that sounds interesting to you, please keep on watching. So today I want to talk about basically how I think about personal style and my context that I come from it, and also how you can think of costume design and the process that we go through as costume designers, and how you can create your personal style based on that, and really finding your why to why you dress and why you decide to dress the way that you do. So if that sounds interesting to you, please keep on watching. I would love to have you. So for context, I'm sure you know what the job of the costume designer is for a movie, when you go see a play, when you go to a concert, or if you go to some sort of event. All of those types of jobs require costume designers, and that's because performers need to be clothed to perform, right? Generally speaking. And that means that the costume designer's job is to take a concept or a text or a script or an idea and interpret that through both their experience and their knowledge of the product, of what is eventually going to become the product, and be able to interpret that through clothing. And that means that clothing, as it means for a performance, and that means that clothing, when it comes to performance, does not exist without any sort of context: historical, political, religious, cultural, societal, or otherwise, right? Those contexts are always going to be there, and that's really important to understand. The thing is, that's not just true on stage or in a movie or in a TV show or at a concert or anything like that. None of that exists without context. That's also true for you as an everyday person going through life, having to go to work, to school, or take your kids to school, or, as a parent, or taking them to extracurricular activities, or going to special events, or weddings, or funerals, or anything like that. All of that has context to it. And it means that the way that you dress, no matter how neutral you intend it to be, it is never neutral. So that means that if you were in the market to become someone who is really conscious about the way that you style yourself and dress yourself every day, and what that says about you as a person and your behavior, and also how you respond to the world and environment around you, then this might be an interesting method for you to use, is to think like a costume designer. And this could also be like thinking like a personal stylist. And stylists think about this in a way that is more specific to fashion. And the costume design way that I'm kind of thinking of is more about thinking of yourself as a piece of your own narrative of what you want to communicate to the world. And not to say that stylists don't think this way. I imagine that they do. It's just that I find that maybe for me and for a lot of other people, understanding the way to like harness main character energy is to understand that you are in fact a character in a story, and that story being your life, and the idea that you have a narrative that changes, that is not static, I think is also really important to think about. So I've kind of been thinking of this as like a 3-step process that will be able to conceive of how you might imagine creating your ideal self that is not necessarily a perfect self, but does have some sense of who you are, how it comports with the world, and how you can respond to the world around you in a way that does not ignore yourself as want to be and who you are. So I just want to bring up a couple points. And if at any point you have questions about this, please let me know. I really have been trying to put these thoughts together in a way that can help me understand this a little bit better in terms of both my life, but also if this is something that's interesting to you, how I could talk through that with you. So the first part is about understanding what your context is. First, I'm going to understand what that means as a costume designer, and then I'm going to explain what it means for you as an everyday person who is not a costume designer, but is the costume designer of your own life, because that's essentially what you are. When you style yourself every day, you are essentially the costume designer of your life. You are thinking about all the things that you need to do today, how that relates to who you are as a person, and what you need to do to, go about being a person in a society, and how that relates to the clothing that you wear. When I mean context, this is kind of the world that we have been given to respond to as artists, essentially. So as a costume designer, that means acquiring text, usually a script, sometimes an idea, sometimes storyboards, and being able to say, okay, based on, the text that we have, I'm just going to refer to it as text going forward. Based on the text that we have right now, these are the pieces that I'm interested in. These are the concepts that I'm interested in. How do I respond to time period? In this case, present day. Okay, now that we have present day, there's so many different types of styles that I could think of. How does this person, think about the style that's in vogue in their own culture, whether that's American culture, some European cultures, cultures from the African continent. How do I view that context that I've been given? And how can I use that to pull concepts that this person might find interesting, that might catch their eye, that might relate to something that's happened to them in their life and understand their personal story? And then from there, you start just brain dumping ideas, understanding what their personality is like, what are the environments they have to deal with, what routines do they have to deal with outside of the story that we're being given today? What does a normal day without this conflict that we're inflicting upon these characters, what does that look like? Because you're going into the sense of conflict that would come in a theater piece or a TV show or a film. You're coming into that conflict with the routine that the different conflict didn't have before, right? That means understanding all of that, and essentially you get a text to do that. For you, as an everyday person, I'm not going to say ordinary, because you're more than ordinary, and that's important that you understand, because when you're doing this, you are now the main character, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are the main character of your own story. If you didn't get that by now, you get it now. So you, as the main character, and as also your costume designer, you now have to think about what your context is. Your context is your life story and the things that come up before this moment. Of course they are. And it could be boiled down to, I wouldn't say boiled down to these 4 things and nothing else. You, of course, are more than the sum of these parts, right? But these are the things that kind of influence most what you do when you are dressing yourself. The first thing I like to think of is your personality. So the experiences you've had as a person, how you, respond to conflict and engage with the world, how you present yourself in terms of your behaviors and the combination of your behaviors. Those all create your personality, right? It's not just about how you verbally communicate with the world and others around you. It's also how you communicate non-verbally with them. As I go through all of this, it can be really easy for you to begin to judge who this person is, and all about their little quirks and eccentricities that make you you. It's important that when you're thinking about this context work, that you are not judging yourself for this work. It is the number one piece of advice that actors are given when they are learning to act and learning to act with scripts. They are also learning that they cannot judge these people because of the way that they are and how they respond in society. It is because the things that they're doing are inherently human, right? You're a human person, right? So it does mean that you have to not judge the quirks that you know that you have harshly at all. They are just who you are. And if you want to change that, you can always change that later. And you can always find new ways to think or rethink that later, but it is who you are. And it's just understanding that that's who you are right now in this moment. And when it comes to you, if you just find ways, if you just try not to do that, then you begin to lose your sense of self, right? So these are the ways that you feel most at home right now in this moment, right? This is not a be yourself type of thing. It's just understanding that finding who you are as a person, all of your quirks, the things that make you you, and understanding you is an important part of understanding how you present yourself to the world, right? And it's just like in performance, actors, like I said, they're told not to judge the characters they're portraying at all, because they have to find a way to justify it. And if they can't justify the behaviors and the quirks or the actions of this character, then it doesn't become believable. And for you, that would translate to you don't feel like you're the authentic version of yourself. And that can affect your self-concept, your self-esteem, the image that you present yourself. And it does mean that maybe you don't feel at home in your skin. And the goal is to feel at home in your skin while also helping to present to the world that this is who I am. Take it or leave it. The next part is your routine. And this is just the day-to-day life that you have to face as a person. This is getting up, getting ready for work, getting ready for school, getting ready for whatever your day-to-day routine is, and how this, what are the needs that come with your routine. If your routine is you're a mom who's got to take your kids everywhere, all over the place, all the time, that does purport a need for some sort of ease and some sort of comfort and less forethought in the morning when you're getting ready for everything, to think about how you're going to dress, because the thing you got to worry about is getting the kids dressed and out the door before noon so that you can just get on with your life, right? So your routine does have an impact on this. But also, when I think of routine, I also think about the things that break your everyday routine. This could be life events like weddings, anniversaries, dates. This could be funerals. This could be going to your, annoying friend's house for Friendsgiving. This could be other holidays that you have to deal with. It could be all the things that break your routine also have an impact on this context of yourself, right? Because there is no story without tension and conflict, right? So things that break your routine create tension. For just thinking about your narrative here, those all create tension. Next is your environment. That is, what does the world around you look like when you are going about your routine? So this could be something as simple as the climate, but it could also be at, your workplace. It could be your, places, like the places you go to, like the grocery store or the library, or all of those things. All of those are different environments, have different expectations of them, have different, needs that might accommodate them. And the thing is, how do you think of those things, and how do they purport with your life, and how do they kind of work with you as a person, right? And the last one is a little bit abstract, but there is no narrative without change, right? Just like there is no narrative without tension, without conflict. And just like that, those tension and conflicts can't not exist, I should say, in, entertainment in the form of film, TV, theater, what have you. All of that also is true about your life. Your life is never going to be without struggle, without conflict, without tension, right? And that does mean that there also needs to be change. If you are never changed from anything, right, then where is that coming from? And in the context of narrative, that does mean that there always has to be some sort of change that happens within the person. And you, as an individual, you get some control in what you want that change to be. And so a part that can't influence your context is the desires that you have in your story, right? Your desire to be a little bit like more refined, or your desire to be a little bit more chaotic. and how does that translate into your sense of context? That also has an impact in a way that is a little bit different, but can influence your personality, your routines, and your environment. So those four things together do create your sense of context. They kind of essentialize your story into something that's easy to translate and be able to give interpretation to. Now that you have like figured out essentially what is going to be this narrative that you're going to use to create this new personal style wardrobe, response to the world, whatever you want to call it here. I'm just going to call it your wardrobe because that's the easiest. That's essentially what your product is going to be, right? Once you've created the context in which that stuff, all of that work exists, now you can begin the planning process of what that physically looks like. Because right now we've just worked in abstraction. Right now we have just worked in abstraction. And so that now means that we need to find a way to contextualize this abstract thought we've been giving, this kind of high level thinking we've been thinking about ourselves as a person, the world that we live in, and what we want to do to respond to it. That means nothing if we have nothing practical to show for it. So this is where the planning begins. I know it sounds like we've done a lot, but I promise this is where the planning begins. In the world of costume design, that means that this is starting to be done with, it starts, honestly, at least in my experience, this could be different for other designers, but we're talking about me here because I'm talking about myself. Anyway, this begins with sketching, just like sketching out like patterns, motifs. I might pull out like a figure and draw an outfit for someone. Especially, thankfully, in theater, you don't have to do nearly as much individual looks that you would need to do for film, because it's easy to like film that work out of order and be able to plan all of that, and someone just can go change and they can stop the camera. With theater, you also have the limitation of physical space backstage, especially if you have a bunch of actors. You also now have to deal with the time limitations to give an actor to change. In smaller theaters, often actors don't have dressers, especially if you're working in a non-union theater. Actors don't have dressers. Because of that, you are limited based on the pacing needs of the show. Pacing in film can be determined by editing, but in theater, you really have, it's live. It's live, babe. You gotta be on it, right? For the everyday person, that's a little bit different. You have practical needs that you have to meet that are also based on environment, based on what your routines are, based on the types of breaks from routine that you have. It's not like you're going to a wedding every single week. Sometimes it can feel that way, but that's not what's happening. So you don't need dresses. You don't need a large number of dresses, for one, in general anyway, but you also don't need a new dress every weekend for that. Unless it's like a societal expected thing, then in which case the way you may respond is that you need a dress every weekend for that. You don't have an unlimited costume budget. You don't get a network budget for dressing your wardrobe. You might have, at most over time, $1,000 to $1,500 over the course of several years to put this wardrobe together, or you might have as much time as it takes with as much budget as you need. That is a lot less than you would want it to be, but is there to put this wardrobe together. So for you, that means that you can really think about how all of this stuff might translate. So if you're a bubbly person, do you like things with a lot of curved edges, like barrel-legged pants or bubble skirts? Or do you like big, bold colors, like pattern mixing, color blocking, and thinking of the adjectives that you've kind of discovered for yourself and how they could translate into clothing? If you're a little bit more minimalist and straight-laced, like what do those patterns and what do those colors look like? And how much do they feel at home for you? And being able to just dump all that information out onto, say, a mood board. I'm a millennial, sometimes very proud millennial, which means that a Pinterest board hates to see me coming. So that means that I have a lot of Pinterest boards that speak to things about my style, the ways that I want to expand beyond it and contract away from what I thought served me in the past and doesn't now. And just really thinking about that only in the context of what you find, what interests you in terms of texture and fabric and silhouette and color and pattern and individual pieces and all of those things, and what interests you from that context. And before I go forward, I do want to make a note about when you're finding inspiration. If this is something that's like new to you, it's going to be really easy for you to, the first thing that you do is to go on to your social media photo app of choice, some of which might be owned by Meta or something of those lines, and find the content creators who have the fashion that you like. And I know that that sounds pretty innocuous, but I do actually want to caution against it. And here's why. Um, for one, half the time, the outfits that they're showing, they either have been sent as PR from that company or they're doing a sponsorship. So there is some sort of incentive for them to wear that outfit. It might not necessarily comport with their sense of self. It also could be that the companies themselves don't necessarily comport with your personal values. In a lot of cases, that is the case, especially as we deal with the proliferation of fast fashion in the clothing market and the knowledge that clothing as a whole has deteriorated in quality over time. And it's hard to look at those styles and not realize that that's what's happening, right? Another thing, too, is just like clothing on you doesn't exist without context, clothing on them does not exist without context either. The person that you might be watching, that you might be thinking, oh, I really like this outfit, but it wouldn't look great on me, they may also be thinking the same thing. And the way that you subconsciously feel about your body versus their body is going to impact your self concept in a way that will not be helpful to you in this journey. If you think of this as a way to create a context for yourself when you are in a different body that you are currently in now, all that you will be thinking about is finding your way to that body as quickly as possible so that you can become an idealized, perfected self, which is not what we're doing here. And yeah, yeah, that is not what we're doing here at all. And it's a hard thing to really come across in terms of when you're finding your context and finding that the negative image of your body is part of that context. It is really hard to not be influenced negatively in that way. The idea behind this approach is that it should be done with as neutral of a feeling about how your body looks as possible. And that's a really scary thing to do. It really is. In fact, I'm thinking of it now and I'm like terrified to do that type of thing. So I'm right there with you, right? There are things that I don't love about my body. There are things that I do love about my body, and that does not matter. What matters is that it's a body that is currently here and it needs to be clothed. If you want to change your body, I'm here for you. I'm here for you to do whatever you want to do, so long as you know that it's an important part of your self-concept and not merely a response to the environment around you. If it's purely a response to the environment around you, you should really be thinking about what that environment is saying to you, what it's expecting of you, and whether or not you want to meet that standard based purely on what the environment around you is expecting you to do. It should be something that's purely for you, right? And it should be something that, no matter how difficult, it is for your own goal. Whether that, if you want to be in a smaller body, okay, great. Is that because you want to be in a smaller body, or is it because the environment has told you that you should be? And it is important that you understand that distinction. And this work can be hard to do if you don't really think about that distinction first. And that does mean that it does mean putting the influencer accounts down for a little bit when you're thinking of this process. Yeah, tangent over. Okay, back to the other part. Back to planning. Great. So now actually, no, we're not done. I'm going to rant a little bit more about this because it's really important. When you think about the way that the environment expects you to be, it also is trying to spoon feed you that information. And whether that means that you found that information for yourself and are now deciding that based on what you have found, that doesn't matter. If you don't think about it first, people will think about it for you. And it's really important that you think about the things that you want in terms of how you want to present yourself to the world before the world decides it for you, because the world will decide it for you. They absolutely will. And that spoon feeding of what they want you to want for yourself is what influences you to things like overconsumption, negative body image, all those feelings of needing to keep up with the trends, even though the trends don't match how you feel about yourself and what you want to present to the world, but you have to keep up with them anyway because everything else told you that you had to. And it creates that feeling of inadequacy when those things don't work out for you and don't serve your narrative and don't serve what you want out of the world. So that does mean you can't rely on your favorite influencers to help you find this sense of style based on your personality, environment, routines, and desires. You can't rely on them for that. This is something that you will have to be able to create for yourself. AI will not do that because AI is influenced by the people who input the system into it. And that does mean that it has to come from you. And that's a lot of work. And it's really vulnerable. And it's really scary. And that's why I'm laughing, because I'm a nervous laugher. And the idea of doing it is really scary for me too. And this is someone who's done it. I've done it before, right? All of this work. This means like really confronting things that you don't want to confront and rant over. Now we're going to go back to planning. Yes. So now that you've like planned everything for this project, you can then put that plan information to how you need to organize it. There's a whole, like, you've just dumped all this information out onto your Pinterest board, onto a, cardboard poster board that you bought from the, office supply store with a bunch of magazine clippings and pieces of grass or whatever influenced you really throughout this whole process. Or you have, done the virtual version of that by using an app like Milanote or what have you, right? I have a little planner in my little good notes that has an entire vision board of what I want to present to the world in this year, right? And all of that is really similar. So now that you've dumped it all down, you can then organize it based on, okay, these concepts really match with this type of style and this type of silhouette and this like period of time that really interests me. And now you can then like translate to like, okay, now how does that translate in the context of clothing specifically? If I like something a little bit more straight-laced, then maybe I like peacoats. Maybe I like wide-legged pants. Maybe I like the more minimalist style. And maybe I like the more minimalist style. Or maybe that's what I thought I liked. Maybe I want to try something a little bit more maximalist, a little bit more color-heavy, a little bit more out there for my personal comfort zone, and find a way to match that with the daily needs of my life. Oh, I just needed to do that real quick. This has been taking a lot longer than I thought. Anyway, it's fine. It's all good. That's what we're here for. Okay, so you're in the process of planning and you have dumped all of your information into a mood board, like on Pinterest or something like that. I just say Pinterest because, like I said, perpetual millennial. So that means that I do, in fact, I am going to, go to Pinterest all the time. A mood board hates to see me come in, especially an empty one. Boy, am I gonna fill that mood board up with stuff that inspires me all the time. And this is not an ad for Pinterest in any way, shape, or form. I use that stuff for free. They do not pay me to use that app. I will use it until it no longer exists or is just AI images all over, which is fast becoming a problem. But I digress. So understand that your context and the mood board now gives you a jumping off point to start translating all of those things into practical items for yourself. So that means that now on the mood board, you can add things like physical outfits. Now that you've created a sense of what exactly it is that you love about your context and what interests you as a wearer of clothes, now you can then go to those influencer places, those influencer spaces, I should say. Go to those Pinterest, go to those blogs, go to the YouTube vlogs, go to the TikToks, and understand that outside of the things that are, rigid for you in terms of what your body looks like in this very moment, the way that you want to advertise yourself or express yourself to the world, I should say, all of that exists. You have it in the back of your mind. And for now, right now in this moment, that is the most important part of you looking for more information. Because this doesn't exist without context, remember? So you can find more influences after you've done that initial planning. And then once you have started doing that and finding looks from the people that you have admired all this time, maybe they've got a similar body to you, maybe they got a similar sense of style for you, then you can kind of add those as additional things that you want to try out or possibly acquire or something of that nature. All of this is a cycle of trial and error, which I will talk about in a bit. But now that you've done that planning for yourself, then you can look outside and try to minimize the amount of influence that is coming at you from the world around you. Okay, now that you have done this planning of your context, creating your sense of narrative and text, now that you have planned some that kind of bridge between the completely abstract into the beginnings of practical needs, you can now do the physical task of the acquisition. We're going to call that the acquisition just to simplify everything because this is a long time. Now that you have done the practical work of planning, now you can do the work of acquiring. The first thing this does mean is, I'm going to be honest with you, don't just rely on your clothing sizes, because clothing sizes, particularly American clothing sizes aimed at women, they are basically gibberish. It is like going outside and expecting everything to not be swirled like a Van Gogh painting. And here it is, swirly as heck, and nothing makes sense. So don't rely on clothing sizes to tell you what's going to fit you. I recommend getting, at the bare minimum, some sort of tape measure. These things are so inexpensive. I have so many measuring tapes that I replace often because this material does stretch over time and can distort measurements. I keep them in my backpack. I keep them in my purse. I keep one by my sewing supplies. I keep one, my partner just has one in the bathroom and has one in the bedroom and has one, wherever. They're all over the house. Honestly, I have so many of them, it's kind of silly. And that's because I don't rely on clothing sizes to acquire art items. Even when I am costuming, I can show you if you'd like the sheet that I use whenever I am creating what's called a wardrobe Bible, meaning that I have spreadsheets for every actor, their sizes, their characters' clothing needs, and practically what links I have shopped, where I have gotten those items, can I get duplicates, do I need duplicates? All of that stuff goes into my wardrobe Bible for every show. This is essentially what you're going to do for yourself. You're going to create yourself a wardrobe Bible. That could be a Notion page. That could be a spreadsheet in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you use to create spreadsheets. And just figuring out, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your measurements. The base 3 measurements that you need, especially if you're not going to make your own clothes, is your full chest or full bust. You're going to take your waist measurement, which is either the smallest point on your torso between your chest and your hips, or it is 2 inches above your navel. And then you're going to need your full hip, it's going to be around the fullest part of your hip, encompassing your butt. For some people, if you have a stomach, it might be that your high hip is going to be the widest point below your waist. Some people have the hip bones be the widest point. Either way, you're going to take whatever is the higher of these 2 measurements, because that is the one that you're going to most easily need to accommodate when you're looking to acquire garments. Those are the 3 bare minimum. You also are going to want to have, if you're going to wear jeans or pants, you're going to want your inseam, which is the measurement from the interior of your crotch down to your ankle, and your outseam, which is the points where you would normally wear pants. In my case, I prefer a high rise because, once again, I'm a millennial. So where my waist ends basically to my ankle is what I would consider the outseam. So usually that means from the hip to the ankle on a quote unquote male body. So those are the kind of measurements that you would need, plus your shoe size, your height, that kind of thing. Other measurements like your length of torso, the size of your arm's eye, the length of your arm can come later, but those are the 3 that you need to absolutely know when you're now working to acquire these new clothes. And how you acquire them, that's not my business. I will tell you that my preference would be for you to use the stuff that you have and you love as a physical jumping point, especially if you're someone who doesn't buy new clothing. I won't name specific companies that I will never support, but I will tell you that yes, you could theoretically acquire new garments for them, but to do all of the work that you've just done only to buy clothes that are only going to last 1 wash, waste of your time. Don't do it. I don't recommend it. Okay? I realized I forgot to put on makeup before filming. Too late now. Now begins the step of acquiring. And the first thing I will tell you is how you acquire things is not my business. I do not control your wallet. Your money is your money. You do what you want with it. Understand that none of this work is done without context. And that includes the fact that you have spent all this time understanding your personal context, understanding the way that you want to present yourself to the world, planning all these things, doing all these mood boards, just to spend money at insert like really bad fast fashion company here. Whichever one you're thinking of, I do mean that one, right? Don't waste your time doing all this if you're just going to do something that's going to only last you no time at all. It cannot continue to serve you if it doesn't last. And that's important to remember, right? That this process is now for things that are going to be long-term pieces in your collection. And you're never going to look back now that you've done so much work. You want it to be able to last. I mean, thinking about this as a costume designer, I try not to buy clothes from insert brand that you're thinking of here when I say really bad fast fashion with really bad working conditions and really bad materials and poor quality. I don't buy that stuff. I try not to anyway. There are times when I have no choice, but like if I have to dress a lot of people and they have to have duplicates and they have to have a lot, sometimes I have to rely on the big old Forest app, right? I try not to, honestly. I try to get things secondhand when possible. But that does mean that I need to find ways to acquire things that are going to last, that are going to take a beating over several weeks. Sometimes you need clothes that have different stages of wear for the context of the story. All of that stuff happens for you personally. You want something that lasts for as much of your story as you want. You want it to be able to serve you as long as possible for the person that you want to present to the world. It cannot do that if it is made out of basically the worst polyester you've ever felt or seen in your life and will only last 1 wash before coming out in tatters. It will not last that long. It won't last long enough to serve you, and it's effectively a waste of the time that you have spent acquiring the finances needed to invest in things that will serve you over time. So, insert fast fashion company here. Some of them are European based, some of them are not European based. I'm not mentioning any here. You're thinking of them already. Don't bother. Don't bother planning this work if you're going to have to rely on that. Just start shopping secondhand when possible. And now you know that insert this maybe isn't the best thing to even get secondhand. I don't think it's even worth it to get some of those clothes secondhand unless I know that they're old, like at least 20 years old when they've arrived at the secondhand purveyor of choice. Because I know that those clothes have been tested, they've been washed, they've been worn for years and years. Some of that new stuff from these brands, it's awful. Don't bother with it. So I say this to say, sure, you can go to those fast fashion places, but is that going to really serve you? And if the answer is no, because you want them to last, that means that you need to find ways to invest, use what you have and restyle it, acquire new to use secondhand things, and or, in my case, make them. There are so many people, especially people who are like me, not in a small body, not what is considered the standard, even though my body is closer to the average than what is considered the standard. What that means is the stuff that interests me, that I want to last, that I know is going to last, that fits the context that I want to present to the world, it's so hard to find. And when I can find it, it is out of a budget that I am willing to set, even considering knowing the process that goes into making those clothes. At that point, I might as well just make them for myself. Because even the stuff that's ready to wear that is like well made isn't set to fit you. It's set to be ready to wear and to fit a general fit standard. And move forward with that. So now that you've done your planning, now that we've had more rants about fast fashion, now that we've had that disclaimer about fast fashion, we're going to talk about how you acquire things. So take your measurements, keep them on a little notepad. I shop with it on my phone. I have like a Notion tab that has all of my measurements. Your measurements are just numbers. They're not a moral judgment in any way, shape, or form. They're just your numbers, right? Once you have your measurements, at least your bust, waist, hip, and you have a list of types of things that you want to acquire, they don't have to be exact, but they can kind of fit the vibes that you need. You can then go and either shop them secondhand or find those investment pieces that will last you a long time. And understand that you're also not going to be perfect in the process of acquiring new things, but that you can be better than what you were doing before. So that means acquiring things. Sometimes it means just having an entirely only using stuff you already own and how that works into your context. And once you've acquired these things and used them, you can then determine what serves you continually, and in which case is worthy of maintaining and repair. Not to say that no clothing is worthy of retaining and repair. All of it is. Just be aware. And what should be best served to someone else who would better be suited or a piece of clothing. Because, for me, that means that it does mean donating to thrift shops when possible and making sure clothing is in the best condition possible when I donate it. It also means that when I remember to anyway, joining a local free cycle or buy nothing group and exchanging it that way to someone who might better serve that, so that it's going cyclically within your community and not going to landfill. The point of all this is to think critically and mindfully of the things that we're acquiring and how they serve our wardrobe and the life that we live and the way that we want to present ourselves to the world. And what to do with it mindfully when it no longer serves us. Because sometimes clothing will no longer serve you. It doesn't fit anymore, for example. And instead of taking it in and taking it in and taking it in, there's someone out there who's got a similar body size to what you used to have or what you do have that would love that piece of clothing and would love to have it in a way that really fulfills what they need. for their need to present everything to the world. That's all important. All of that does fall in the line of acquisition. And so that's it. Context, planning, acquisition. Those are the 3 steps. That's where I am right now. Ooh, I bumped the microphone. That is where I am right now. My voice is very hoarse, so I'm going to end this quickly. So yes, the point of that is not to be any different than how a personal stylist might style you, or how you might think of when you're going to shop. I just want to present this as an idea of how you can acquire new things to wear in your life that is done consciously and mindfully, and understanding that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Science. None of this is without consequence or waste or risk or anything of that nature. I hope that this process of context planning and acquisition gives you a base compass to navigate a personal style journey for yourself. My goal is to help you understand your why of why you wear what you wear, and be able to think critically about it. Understand that nothing about what you wear is without context. Understanding your why can help you understand what is being fed to you and what genuinely intrigues you and what genuinely will serve you to help you mindfully acquire things that are new to you in any way, shape, or form. In an ideal world, we would never get rid of clothing, right? But our bodies change, our tastes change, how we want to present ourselves to the world changes, whether for the better or for worse. It all changes. So sometimes the things that we have that take up the space that we need to fit our new lives sometimes won't serve us. And so being mindful about how we acquire new things will help these things that we need to do to exist in a society help us all serve us well. So that's all I have. Just in time for me to lose my voice. If you're like me and you have a mission to learn about the things that will serve you in terms of clothing and also make those types of things, YouTube will be recommending some video here at any point here about all of my other content here on this here channel. I talk about a lot of things about sewing, acting, crafting. I'm in the process of learning new skills for a pretty big project that is coming this fall that I cannot show before this fall because it's a big project and does require me to work a lot of time on it. So if you want to keep up with that, once I have that dropped, as well as everything else that I'm working on, please, I invite you to subscribe. I have a cute little community over here. She's very fun. It's a very supportive place. Love it when people talk about the things that they're working on. So let me know what you're working on down below. Have you ever been, what is your personal style journey like right now? I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, I hope that what do I hope for you today? I hope that you understand that you are the context of everything that's come before you, and it's all wonderful and interesting and beautiful and fascinating, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And until next time, have a good day. Bye.